A reading from Galatians chapter 2, verses 11 to 14. But when Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he was wrong. He had been eating with the Gentiles before certain people came from James. But when they came, he began to back out and separate himself because he was afraid of the people who promoted circumcision. And the rest of the Jews also joined him in this hypocrisy, so that even Barnabas got carried away with them in their hypocrisy. But when I saw that they weren't acting consistently with the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas in front of everyone, "If you, though you're a Jew, live like a Gentile and not like a Jew, how can you require the Gentiles to live like Jews?" May God help us to apply these words to our lives. Let it be so. I invite you to take a deep breath with me. Let us breathe in and out. One of my all-time favorite shows is The Big Bang Theory. It aired on network television from 2007 to 2019. And for those of you who are not familiar with this show, let me give you the basics. At the core of the show are four friends who are super intelligent. They are physicists and engineers. Two of these friends, Sheldon and Leonard, live across the hall from Penny, the stereotypical blonde woman who has moved to the area to become an actress but currently works at the Cheesecake Factory. In the Christmas episode from season 2, we discover that Sheldon does not believe in Christmas, and that his philosophy of gift giving is returning every gift he receives with an equally priced gift. So when he discovers that Penny has bought him a Christmas gift, he goes out to try to find an appropriate gift for her. His friends convince him to purchase a basket filled with bubble bath, lotion, a candle at a store similar to Bath and Body Works. But Sheldon doesn't know what size of a basket to give Penny because he doesn't know what gift she is giving him. So he buys every basket. A small one, a medium one, and several different very large baskets. When Sheldon finally opens the gift from Penny, he finds a napkin. And he seems unimpressed at first. Then Penny tells him to turn it over, and that is when he discovers it's signed by Leonard Nimoy, who is an icon in the Star Trek universe because he played Spock. And he's Sheldon's all-time favorite celebrity. Sheldon is so touched that he becomes baffled at the correct way to respond to such a perfect gift. So he gives Penny all the baskets and then does something uncharacteristic. He gives Penny a hug. Now, this episode is filled with comedic moments and lots of laughter. This is partly because Sheldon does what we all do, except he does it to the extreme. We all try to meet the required social expectations of our friends and families when we are purchasing gifts. So, like Sheldon, we often aim to give a gift that is equal in value to what we believe the other person will give us. In other words, we just try to be nice. Now, the definition of nice means to be pleasant or agreeable, satisfactory, and polite. Certainly, this is what Sheldon is trying to do when he gives his gift to Penny. And we try to do the same when we are giving gifts and when we are in a variety of social places: school, work, at the gym, and other organizations we belong to. And so it should not be surprising that this is also how we act at church. We expect that people are nice here. We expect that people are pleasant, agreeable, and polite. And yet, when we look at our text for today, we find that Paul is not polite nor agreeable, and he certainly isn't being pleasant to Peter. Now, the letter to Galatians was believed to be written by Paul in the first century, somewhere between the 40s and the 50s. Paul had some connection to the Galatians, most likely because he had visited and had preached in the community. We do not know if the Galatians had sent Paul a letter, and if they did, we don't have it. From what we do have, we know that the community in Galatia which is in the present day Turkey, was having an argument or debate about what Gentiles had to do in order to be considered a follower of Jesus. This is the same argument we have been discussing in the book of Acts. At the core of this internal argument is whether or not the Gentiles needed to convert to Judaism. A couple of weeks ago, we read the story of this debate among the leaders in Jerusalem, including Peter, which at the end agreed that the Gentiles did not need to convert. Paul has heard, either through a letter from the Galatians or through the grapevine, that some Jewish people have come to the community in Galatia and have begun to preach that the Gentiles need to become Jewish in order to be considered full members of the faith. Paul is very clear that this is not required. He goes on to tell his story of how he became a follower of Jesus and how Peter and the other apostles accepted Paul's calling to preach to the Gentiles and treated him and Barnabas as equals. In our text today, we're told the Cephas, which means rock in Aramaic and is another name for Peter, that when Cephas or Peter came to Antioch where Paul and Barnabas are preaching, Paul confronts him. Paul tells us that Peter had been eating with the Gentiles up until other Jewish leaders came to Antioch. And then Peter stopped eating with them and began to separate himself. Paul says that Peter did this because he was afraid, which is understandable. How many times have we been afraid? Afraid to speak our truth? Afraid to stand up for what we believe? Afraid to act a certain way? We have all been afraid. For example, if you have ever gone to college, moved into your own apartment, or moved far away from home, when you went back to visit your family, did you adjust your language? Did you change what you talked about? Or even what manners you used? Likely you did. Because at some level, we are all afraid of what our family members will think of us. In the church, this same fear comes up in a variety of ways. For example, when a church considers a new mission opportunity, such as becoming anti-racist or radically supporting the unhoused or immigrants, there is often a debate among leadership as to what will happen if we do this. Leaders will often say that if we go down this road, then we will lose members or financial giving or the favor of the most powerful people in the community. In my experience, this fear usually shuts down any further conversation or movement forward. Peter is also afraid. He's afraid of what the leaders will think of him and his ministry. So he adjusts his behavior. Paul's response is not what we might call nice or pleasant or agreeable. Paul tells us that he confronted Peter in front of everyone, and he asked him, if you, a Jew, live like a Gentile, how can you require a Gentile to live like a Jew? In other words, if you don't follow Jewish law, why should they? Now, when or if we read this text in church, we often think that Paul was not being Christian. He was not being nice, nor pleasant, nor agreeable, and he was not exhibiting Christian behavior. But Christianity is not about being nice. Christianity is about being kind. Kindness is defined as having a deep sense of care for others, having empathy, being generous, exhibiting actions that prioritize the well-being of others over ourselves, and treating others with respect. This is what the church is about: kindness. And kindness often leads to justice. For example, when we think about others, we are more apt to ask questions about the status quo. We are more likely to also stand up against injustice and fight for change. We are more willing to give up our own reputation, our own safety, and even ourselves in order that others might live better. When we look at the gospel stories of Jesus, we find not a man who was nice, but a man who was kind. Jesus didn't eat with sinners and touch the unclean and stand up to those in power just to be nice. Jesus lost everything, his reputation and even his life, in order to help others in his day. In the Hebrew Bible, the prophet Micah wrote, "What does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God." The words translated as love kindness in the Hebrew is hesed, which means faithful love in action. In the Hebrew Bible, God is the best example of hesed, as God faithfully remembers and cares for the Israelites. But we too are called to love kindness, to live out faithful love through action. And to do that, we can't just avoid conflict. Doing so, yes, avoids risk, but it also allows harm to continue to happen. It allows people to believe that their bad behavior is okay. And it fosters misinterpretations and allows unresolved issues to fester. And it creates frustration and resentment. And none of this is good or healthy in a community. If we are kind and truly care about those in our community, if we want our church to be a safe space for all people, if we want to help one another become better people and be more Christ-like, then we have to be kind. And to be kind means that we have to tell people when they have hurt us. And we have to hold them accountable for their actions. Now, to be clear, I do not recommend you ever do this publicly. It won't end well. But if you approach another person with care and empathy and kindness, often people will surprise you. They will hear what you have to say, even if their first reactions are defensive. I know this can be difficult, especially if you have been taught something completely different. So here are a few pointers. 1, don't do this publicly. I can't say it enough. Don't do it publicly. 2, be clear about the best outcome you hope for. What do you actually want to have happen? 3, write out your bullet points and try to be clear and concise. And 4, be kind. Set a tone that is empathetic and loving. Now, this is not easy, but neither is ignoring or avoiding conflict. And hiding your feelings does not create a healthy, loving, Christ-like atmosphere. Every day, we have to choose how we will address the disagreements, the conflicts, and hurts we experience in this life. We can choose to be nice, or we can choose to be kind. We have to make this choice at the coffee shop, at the grocery store, and even at home. Every day, we have to choose to follow in the footsteps of Jesus. So may God grant us the grace to be kind and to share what we feel rather than avoiding the hard things. Amen.